The sky over the valley had gone iron gray, heavy with a promise of rain. Ethan adjusted the strap of his rifle and scanned the tree one more time before heading back to the shack. The boards creaked beneath his boots as he stepped onto the porch, the worn wood groaning like it resented the weight. Solitude had become a second skin. It was better this way. Fewer people meant fewer problems. The fire in the stove was dying, casting only a thin glow on the cabin walls. He threw another log in and sat down at the table, hands tracing the surface where the wood had been etched with maps and old notes. Most of them were meaningless now, routes to nowhere, places that had long since fallen silent. He poured a cup of boiled water. He hadn't tasted real coffee in years, and listened to the static hum of his shortwave radio. Every night, a habit. Every night, silence. Then, the sound came. Not over the radio, but from outside. A tearing roar, like metal being dragged through the sky. Ethan froze, hand halfway to his rifle. He moved to the window, careful not to disturb the old curtain, and peered out. A streak of light was slicing across the clouds, angling downward, fast. Then, impact. The ground trembled. Distant trees lit up like they'd been caught in a silent explosion. Ethan grabbed his gear, heart kicking against his ribs. He hadn't seen anything fall from the sky in years. Not since the satellites died. Not since the rest of the world stopped talking. He made his way through the brush, the scent of ozone thick in the air. It took him 20 minutes to reach the crater, half shielded by the wreckage of broken trees. There, nestled in the torn earth, was something he couldn't explain. It wasn't a ship in the way he'd imagined, not smooth and metallic, but almost organic in its curves. Faint lights blinked along its surface like dying stars. As he approached, he raised his rifle, fingers tense. The hatch hissed open, and she stepped out. She looked almost human, but not quite. Her skin was pale, almost silver in the moonlight, and her eyes held no whites. Only a deep, luminescent gray that made it hard to look away. Long blonde hair flowed behind her like a veil, and her armor, tactical, scarred, clearly well-worn, clung to her like a second skin. Her gaze met his, sharp and unflinching. Ethan didn't lower the rifle. "Don't move." She tilted her head slightly. "You're afraid. Smart girl. I'm not here to harm you." People say a lot of things before pulling the trigger. She stepped forward, not aggressively, but with a strange calm, as if she'd already seen this moment unfold. "Your name is Ethan." His grip tightened. "How do you know that?" "I've been watching, listening." Her voice was soft, but carried a weight he couldn't define. "You've been alone for 6 years." He blinked. "That's classified data. Military logs." She nodded. "We intercepted them before the network collapsed." "Who's we?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked up at the sky, then back at him. "The atmosphere's degrading faster than projected. You've noticed it, haven't you? The plant's dying out of season. The increased radiation in the north." "Why are you here?" he asked, not dropping the barrel. "To help." He scoffed. "You show up in a crash and expect me to believe you're a savior?" "No. I expect you to believe what you see." And what he saw was impossible. Her ship, if it could be called that, was now sealing itself, its wounds closing slowly as if it were alive. His instincts screamed to walk away, to report this if there was anyone left to report to, but something about her held him rooted. "I need shelter," she said simply. "Just for a few days. And if I say no?" She looked at him, eyes steady. "You won't." Against better judgment, he led her back. The cabin wasn't much, but it kept the cold out and the rain off. She didn't speak as they walked, though her gaze was always moving, cataloging the trees, the decay, the silence. She didn't ask what happened to the world. Maybe she already knew. Inside, she moved like she belonged, setting her weapon, sleek, alien, against the wall and removing her cloak. Underneath, her suit bore insignias he didn't recognize. She sat without being asked, her posture straight, as if she'd been trained for diplomacy and war. "You have a name?" Ethan asked, keeping his own voice guarded. "Arya." He studied her for a long time, then finally lowered the rifle. "I want answers." "You'll get them. In time." "That's not good enough." She leaned forward slightly. "You've survived this long because you're cautious. Smart. But right now, your survival depends on trusting someone again. Trust got me nothing but graves." A silence stretched between them. Then she said, "The collapse wasn't natural." "Not entirely." Ethan's eyes narrowed. You're saying we were attacked? Not in the way you think. Your world was tested, measured, judged, and what? We failed. Arya looked at him, and for the first time, there was something like sorrow in her face. Not failed, but chosen. He stood, restless. This is nonsense. Chosen for what? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into a pouch and pulled out a device, small, circular, with shifting lights in its core. She placed it on the table. It pulsed once, and a projection rose. A map of Earth, overlaid with symbols he didn't understand. Red zones, blue flares, motion. This is your planet, she said, as seen from above. And from beneath. He stared at it. What's beneath? She didn't look away. Them. There was no name, no elaboration. Just that word, and the cold certainty in her voice. Ethan didn't ask more. Not that night. The days that followed blurred. Arya spoke little, spending hours outside, examining soil samples, scanning the air. She never slept. Or if she did, it was when he wasn't watching. She fixed the comm unit he thought was dead, repaired solar cells, even enhanced the cabin's defenses without asking. Efficient, precise, always focused. But it was in the quiet moments, when her gaze lingered on old photos, or when she asked about human rituals, music, stories, that something deeper broke through. She wasn't a machine. She felt. She remembered. You miss it, Ethan said one evening. She looked up from the old guitar he hadn't touched in years. Miss what? Wherever you came from. A pause. Yes. And that was all. Then, on the 5th day, she told him she had to leave. The cycle's complete, she said. My people will extract me tonight. He didn't know what to say. He wanted to argue, to ask her to stay, but he'd spent too many years building walls to tear them down in 1 week. You said the world was chosen. For what? She hesitated. That's not my place to decide. But you matter in it. I'm just a man in the woods. You're more than that. You just stopped believing it. She stepped outside, looking up as the stars blinked into view. He followed, the cold air sharp in his lungs. I'll return, she said, when the storm breaks. And if I'm dead. Her eyes met his. Then I will mourn. She turned, moving into the trees. Moments later, a light swept down from the sky. No sound, no blast, just silence and vanishing stars. He waited hours after she was gone, standing in the clearing like a man who'd just awoken from a dream he didn't want to end. When morning came, he found the device on the table, still pulsing. He never told anyone. Not that there was anyone left to tell. But he kept it, just in case. The winters had grown longer. Not colder, but stranger. Snow would fall in one part of the valley, leaving the other untouched. The rivers pulsed with a metallic sheen. Animals, once abundant, had vanished or mutated into things Ethan no longer had words for. The land was decaying in a way that no storm or war could explain. He lived smaller now, less movement, fewer risks. Each step beyond the cabin was calculated, measured. The forest no longer welcomed him. Something in its silence had changed. Years had passed since Arya's departure. Ethan never saw her vessel rise, but he knew she was gone. The proof sat on his work table, the device. It had long since gone dark, the once glowing core now still and cold. He hadn't touched it in months, but he hadn't thrown it away either. It was the only part of her that remained. At first, he told himself she'd lied, that she was just another hallucination conjured from loneliness and desperation. But the enhancements she made to the cabin were real. The comm unit now picked up distant electromagnetic pulses, though nothing decipherable. The solar cells stored more energy than physics should allow. And most damning of all, his air filters still ran off technology he couldn't even begin to reverse engineer. Ethan wanted to believe, but belief was dangerous. He survived by routine, wake, patrol, scavenge, repair. Talk to no one. Trust even fewer. The world had not rebuilt. Whatever was left of civilization had collapsed further into tribal factions, mobile war bands, and desperate scavengers. He'd seen them at a distance. Packs of people with armor made from scrap, their eyes wild. Once, he'd watched a group dismember a man for food. He stayed hidden after that. He hadn't spoken to another human in 11 months. Then, one morning, he saw the flare. It streaked across the pre-dawn sky like a needle of fire, arcing low toward the western ridgeline before vanishing beyond the horizon. It wasn't a meteor. Ethan had seen those. This was controlled, directed, Familiar. He sat still for a long time after, the cold seeping into his bones as he stared westward. He didn't move until the sun crested the trees. That night, the dreams returned. He stood in a place he didn't recognize, surrounded by silver towers humming with alien energy. Arya stood before him, unarmored, dressed in something that shimmered like starlight. Her voice echoed inside his head, not through sound, but something deeper. She didn't speak words, just images, feelings. A warning, a promise. And behind her, something immense loomed in shadow, waiting. Ethan woke in a sweat, the taste of copper in his mouth. He checked the device again. Still inert. He told himself it meant nothing. A dream. A trick of the mind. But he couldn't ignore the sense creeping into him like ivy. Something was coming. The air felt charged, like just before lightning strikes. The birds had gone silent. The soil had a chemical bitterness that killed his remaining crops overnight. The patterns weren't natural. He'd seen enough of nature's indifference to know this wasn't part of it. 2 days later, the stranger appeared. It was just past noon when Ethan spotted movement near the river. He watched through his scope, breath held. The figure was human, or close enough. Male, light armor, ragged gear, moving cautiously, as if hunted. Ethan didn't reveal himself. He followed from a distance, silent through the underbrush. The man was heading straight toward the cabin. That couldn't be coincidence. At the perimeter, the stranger stopped, turning his head as if listening. Then he knelt and placed something on the ground, a metal rod with blinking lights, alien tech. Ethan's blood turned cold. He stepped out, rifle raised. Don't move. The man froze, then slowly lifted his hands. I'm not armed. That's a lie. Try again. Fine. Lightly armed, the man admitted. But not here to fight. I'm looking for someone. Ethan moved closer. The man was younger, maybe late 20s, with dust-caked hair and a voice that carried a clipped accent Ethan didn't recognize. His eyes held the same exhaustion Ethan saw in his own reflection. Who sent you? Ethan asked. The stranger didn't flinch. She did. Arya. A long silence stretched between them. Ethan kept the rifle trained. She's dead. No. She's coming back. Ethan took a step closer, pressing the barrel against the man's chest. Say that again, slower. She sent me to find you. Said you'd doubt it. Gave me this. The man carefully reached into a pouch and pulled out a flat disc, identical to the one Ethan had. But this one still glowed. Ethan stared. What is it? A beacon. She's trying to reconnect. As if on cue, the device in Ethan's cabin began to pulse weakly. He felt it more than heard it. A low hum, like a heartbeat just below the skin. He took the disc, backed away, and disappeared into the trees. He didn't trust the man. Not yet. But the device, that was different. That night, he couldn't sleep. The two beacons sat side by side on his table, one dead, the other alive. When placed near each other, the light between them pulsed faster, like magnets drawing breath. Ethan questioned everything. Why now? Why send a stranger? Why not return herself? He confronted the man the next morning. You say she's coming back. Why should I believe you? Because she showed me your face, the man said quietly. Before I ever saw you. Said you were the anchor. That Earth would follow you. I'm no leader. She disagrees. The beacons emitted a sudden flare of light, a ripple of energy that knocked over a glass. The air shimmered for a second, then returned to normal. Ethan looked at the devices, then at the man. If she's really coming, tell me when. She didn't say, just said you'd know when it began. Ethan laughed dryly, cryptic as ever. He let the man stay the night. Posted guards. Watched for signs of betrayal. Nothing came, but he didn't sleep. He watched the trees, the sky, and waited. Because deep in his chest, past the scars and silence, something old and buried began to stir. Hope, or maybe fear. Either way, it meant she was real, and she was keeping her promise. The storm arrived without warning. Not from the sky, but from beneath the earth. Ethan felt it before he saw it. An unsettling vibration that started in his boots and climbed into his bones. The cabin's windows hummed. Outside, the trees shivered without wind. Animals screamed in the distance. Brief, piercing sounds abruptly silenced. The air grew denser, as if pressing inward from every direction. The stranger, who called himself Kale, shot upright from his post by the perimeter. He'd been vigilant since his arrival, never fully at rest, like a soldier who hadn't left the battlefield even when the war had ended. But this was different. He looked to Ethan with sharp, searching eyes. "This is it," Cale said. She said the ground would scream first. Ethan didn't ask how Cale knew. He just moved, grabbing his rifle and strapping on the last of the armor salvaged from long-forgotten bunkers. He'd patched it with leather, ceramic plates, and alien mesh that Arya had left behind. It didn't match, but it worked. Cale slung a compact plasma weapon across his back. "The portal's forming." Ethan stared at him. "What portal?" "The one that brings her through." "Arya," Cale nodded. "And others." He didn't like the sound of that. The storm intensified, now accompanied by a low-frequency hum that pressed against Ethan's skull like static turned into pressure. He winced and turned to check the beacon. It was glowing wildly now, rotating on its own, casting fractured light patterns on the walls. And then it stopped. In the sudden silence, a sharp crack echoed from the tree-line, followed by a deep, resonant pulse that shook the ground. The earth split open in the distance, as if torn by invisible hands. Bright tendrils of energy arced upward, forming a jagged dome of blue fire in the sky. Trees near the epicenter burned without flame, collapsing into ash as if aged 1,000 years in seconds. Cale turned to Ethan. "She's here." The words felt like prophecy. They moved swiftly through the forest, Cale leading. The terrain changed the closer they got to the source. Plants wilted, soil blackened, air tasted metallic. The sky flickered between natural gray and unnatural neon blue. Ethan's head throbbed with the dissonant vibration. Then, through the haze, he saw her. Arya stood in the center of the crater, suspended a meter above the ground, encased in a sphere of kinetic light. Her armor was new, sleeker, darker, etched with symbols that glowed faintly. Her expression was unreadable, eyes glowing with pale intensity. Around her, shapes were emerging from the distortion, bipedal, armored beings unlike any Ethan had seen. Not human, not machine. Something in between. Cale dropped to one knee. The envoy returns. Ethan stayed standing. Arya's gaze found him instantly. She descended slowly, the energy field peeling away like mist. Her boots touched earth without sound. For a moment, no one spoke. "You came back," Ethan said. "I promised I would," she replied, her voice smooth, yet different, infused with harmonic undertones that suggested she had evolved. "What is all this?" he asked, gesturing to the figures behind her. "They are my kin now," she said. "Sentinels of the Divide. We crossed the rift to deliver a final offer." Ethan frowned. "Offer to who?" "To the remnants of your world. An alliance. An invasion." She didn't flinch. "A choice." Cale rose beside Ethan. "The other factions won't listen. They'll attack. They already know something's happening." Arya nodded. "That's why I came to you first. You were always the fulcrum. You decide which way the scales tip." Ethan shook his head. "I'm no leader." "You are the last voice this land trusts," she replied. "Even in silence, you shaped the outcome." He looked at the sentinels. Their eyes glowed like hers. They didn't move, didn't breathe, but they watched, waiting. "What happens if I refuse?" "Then we'll defend ourselves," she said quietly. "And your world will burn before it heals." It was a threat wrapped in sorrow. Ethan turned away, walked to the edge of the crater. From this vantage point, he could see the horizon. In the distance, black smoke curled into the air. Vehicles, drones, approaching fast. "They're already coming," he said. Cale stepped forward. "Then you need to choose now." "I don't have the right." "You have the responsibility," Arya replied. She moved closer, face inches from his. He could see the faint trace of a scar on her jaw, one he hadn't noticed before. It made her seem more real, more grounded. "Why me?" he whispered. "Because I saw who you were when the world stopped pretending." A single flare shot into the sky behind them. A warning. They were surrounded. Cale drew his weapon. Too late. "They're here." Figures emerged from the tree line. Armed scavengers, rogue factions, humans warped by fear and hunger. They shouted curses, raising crude weapons and outdated tech. Ethan saw familiar faces, men he once worked with, now shells of their former selves. The lead scavenger stepped forward. "Back away from the alien." "She's not the threat," Ethan said. "She's not human. Neither are the ones hunting us." Chaos erupted. The scavengers opened fire. The sentinels moved like shadows, intercepting bullets, redirecting energy blasts with wrist-mounted fields. Arya moved through them like water, non-lethal strikes, disabling rather than killing. Ethan ducked behind a rock, returning fire only when necessary. Cale fought beside him, precise and brutal. The battle was short, violent, and disorienting. When it ended, only moans and smoke remained. Ethan stood, breath ragged. "This isn't sustainable," he muttered. "No," Arya agreed. "Which is why we must leave or unite." Ethan faced her fully. "And if I go with you? You'll live long enough to shape something better." He looked down at his hands. Scars, dirt, blood. He wasn't built for diplomacy. He was barely holding on to survival. And yet, deep down, he knew the truth. If he walked away, there wouldn't be a next time. "I'll talk to the others," he said. "Try to gather what's left that isn't lost." Arya nodded. "Then we begin." As the sun rose, filtered through the remnants of battle smoke and kinetic shimmer, Ethan knew the real conflict hadn't started yet. But for the first time in years, he was walking toward something. Not just surviving, choosing. The message spread faster than Ethan anticipated. Across the fractured networks, through scavenger radios and patched-together satellites, word traveled. She had returned. Some called her a savior. Others, a herald of extinction. But all agreed on one thing. This time, nothing would remain untouched. Ethan stood on the ridge overlooking what was left of Ember Hollow, once a thriving outpost, now a skeletal grid of broken structures and rusted metal. The sun hung low, cloaked in ash. Wind carried the scent of ozone and something bitter, ionized, artificial. Cale approached quietly, his boots crunching overcharred soil. "The emissaries are ready. Have they made contact with the southern reclaimers yet?" Ethan asked without looking back. "They sent a drone." No reply. "Might be bait." Ethan nodded, more to himself than to Cale. "Doesn't matter. We'll go anyway." Cale hesitated. "You trust them that much?" "No," Ethan said. "But I trust that fear's no longer a good excuse." Behind them, the sentinels waited, statuesque in their silence. Arya stood at their center, no longer a figure of mystery, but a known force, calm, precise, and uncompromising. Her presence was magnetic, a blend of impossible grace and tangible danger. She had not slept since returning, nor did she seem to need to. Her eyes watched everything, not judging, calculating. When Ethan approached, she turned to him. "You're ready." He gave a short nod. "As ready as I get." Arya stepped forward, her voice low. "When this begins, you must lead with intent. If your people hesitate, they'll fracture. If you fracture, we lose the window." "What's the real reason you came back, Arya?" he asked suddenly. "Not the mission. You." She tilted her head slightly, as if weighing the honesty of her answer. "Because I made a promise," she said finally. "And I wanted to see if humanity still deserved it." Ethan didn't respond. He didn't know how. They traveled together, a procession of steel and breath, across the dying landscape. Where once fields had grown, now only twisted stumps remained. The sky flickered with remnants of the portal's energy, trails of foreign constellations bleeding through. The world was cracking, not just physically but philosophically. Everything people thought they knew about history, about the stars, was unraveling. When they reached the reclaimer border, they were met by resistance. Armed guards in mismatched armor blocked the path, flanked by jury-rigged mechs and deep field scanners. A woman stepped forward from their ranks, her face marked by radiation burns and command. "You crossed our lines uninvited." Ethan raised a hand. "We come with a proposal. A truce." "You brought them." The woman's gaze locked on Arya. "The war machines. They only fight when provoked," Ethan said. "They came to help. We don't need alien help. We need freedom." Cale stepped forward. "You have neither." "Not here. Not now." The woman's jaw tensed. "Who are you to speak for us?" "I speak for the future you're too afraid to imagine," Cale replied. Tension coiled like wire between them. Arya finally spoke, her voice reaching beyond the ears, into the marrow. "If you wish to die alone, you are free to do so. But if you wish to live as more than survivors, if you wish to evolve, we offer that path." The silence that followed was oppressive. Then the woman said, "You have 1 hour. No weapons inside. One delegate." Ethan nodded. "I'll go." Cale grabbed his arm. "It could be a trap." "Of course it could," Ethan said. "But so was the life we've been living." He entered their base alone. Inside, it was worse than he expected. Families huddled beneath tarp shelters, tech salvaged from 3 centuries pieced together like patchwork skin. Eyes followed him, some curious, most hostile. He felt like a ghost walking among the condemned. The council chamber was a repurposed water tank, lined with screens and low lights. The leaders sat in a semicircle, men and women who had once held power and now clung to its rusted remains. "You expect us to believe she's different from the ones who scorched our skies?" asked one. "She didn't scorch them," Ethan replied. "She patched them. And what does she want in return?" "A future," the room murmured. Another voice, older, tired. "We've heard this before. Alliances, treaties, promises. They all end in blood." "I'm not offering peace," Ethan said. "I'm offering the only war worth surviving." That silenced them. He leaned forward, voice hard. "You want to rebuild? Then stop pretending we can do it with duct tape and ancient bullets." The world changed. Adapt or vanish. No vote was taken, just silence. When he left the tank, the sun had shifted. A single flag had been raised from the compound, a pale gray strip of cloth tied with wire, a symbol of neutral intent. Arya was waiting at the edge. "They'll listen," Ethan said. "For now." Arya gave a nod. "That's enough." But Ethan saw something behind her eyes. Worry, buried deep. "What aren't you telling me?" Arya glanced toward the sky. "The breach never closed. I thought your return sealed it." "No. I passed through a crack. The fracture widened after I left. Others followed." Ethan stiffened. "Others like you?" "No," she said. "Others who think this planet should be erased." The words hit like frost. Kale approached, overhearing the last exchange. "Then we prepare." Ethan looked at them both. The alien envoy and the half-converted scout. They stood with him now, but what lay ahead was no longer about alliances. It was about thresholds, the point beyond which no civilization returns unchanged. He turned to Arya. "When?" "Days," she said. "Maybe less." The final storm was coming, and for once, Ethan didn't feel small against it. He felt ready.